Hello, welcome to the Ministry of Change. I hope you're doing all right. I am doing all right. I'm doing really well, actually. I've got this amazing opportunity at the moment to spend some time living in the mountains in the French Alps. And it's been a really good chance for me to just stop and not really worry too much about what I'm doing, but really just ground myself here. The surroundings are just amazing. They're so awe-inspiring. There's beautiful walks, snow, nature, mountains. I couldn't really ask for more. But what's been so valuable is that opportunity just to stop and reflect. And I realised that before I started this journey with Ministry of Change, the predominant feeling in my life was always one of not being enough. Always one of feeling like I needed to achieve more, that I wasn't reaching my potential. And I think I'd just had this basic understanding of that to really get where you want to be, you always have to have more qualifications, or you need to do something outstanding, something to excel, something to put yourself above the competition. But what I was really missing was the essence that none of that is important. None of that is real. I was already enough. I just couldn't see it because I hadn't had the opportunity or created the opportunity to just stop and listen and to really get to know myself. I was full of self-loathing, and the idea of loving yourself just seemed narcissistic, or it seemed something that wasn't possible to me. But I know very well now that I am enough. And if I really think about it, it's something that I've always known. But it can be hard to feel like you're enough. It can be hard to feel like you're enough when society seems to tell you that you are not. It's hard to feel like you're enough when the world tells you that what you have is not enough. It's hard to feel enough when you are constantly told that you need more, that your phone is too old, that your house is too small. It's hard to feel like you're enough when you are repeatedly told that the hole that you feel deep inside comes from a lack of possessions, a lack of success, a lack of wealth. It's hard to feel like you're enough when the line between what is a need and what is a should is so frustratingly blurred. It's hard to feel like you're enough when the value that you know you have is unable to translate into the economic system that surrounds you. It's hard to feel enough when the things that really matter cannot be tagged with a little blue thumbs up or a yellow smiling face, but instead rely on a deep cultivated sense of self-worth that is fostered within and by the love that surrounds you. It's hard to feel enough when the people around you don't think that they're enough. It's hard to feel enough when the news tells you that you will probably have your job taken away by an immigrant or a robot. It's hard to feel enough when society tells you that you should count yourself lucky for even having that job. It's hard to feel enough when you live in a society that champions a belief in scarcity and closes its eyes and mind to a belief in abundance. It's hard to feel enough when you live in a world that is so disconnected from real and raw emotion. It's hard to feel enough in a society where to display vulnerability is seen as a sign of weakness rather than the strength that it is. It's hard to feel enough when you have become an insignificant number in a small square on a career politician's spreadsheet. It's hard to feel enough when insincere megalomaniacs and resource-sapping giants are rewarded and the people that sweat away on the front line fall through the cracks penniless and disillusioned. It's hard to feel enough when every day the world around you tells you that you are not enough. But you are enough. Yes, you. The world has made it hard for you to see that. But if you stop for a minute and listen, you will feel deep inside the knowing that you are. That might not help right now, but it is that knowing that will eventually help you navigate this wilderness. stripped of your position, your job title, your role, your name, the clothes you wear, the possessions you own, the things that you do. Separated from the mad fantasy that has somehow fashioned itself as an object reality, you are enough. As we climb down our career ladders and invest in our connection with something more than our fear of being talked about over lukewarm cappuccinos, it will become easier to see our enoughness. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to compete and seek growth. You don't need to believe anymore that human nature is built on conflict and greed. Once you can accept that each and every one of us is born enough, then you can stop the destructive cycle of seeking approval. When you can stare into the eyes of your neighbours, your friends and your perceived enemies and know that we are all enough, the world will be enough. We will no longer need to invest money in escape plans to Mars. We will no longer need to build walls made from fear. We will no longer need to stockpile food in our underground bunkers. We will no longer have to isolate ourselves off from the people that can help us. We will no longer need to stay late at the office to earn our promotions. We will no longer need to wait until someone grants us permission to live. When we realise that we are all enough as we are, then we can begin to heal. We can begin to let our natural abilities flow. When we no longer need to compare or compete, the real growth can begin. I know it can be hard to see it, but you are enough. Mental health can be a difficult topic to talk about. I'd like to change that. I'm Marcus Pibworth and welcome to the Ministry of Change podcast. Hello. That was a weird way to start the podcast, wasn't it? I hear you say. Well, I just really wanted to share that poem with you. I wrote it not ages ago, sometime last year, as a message to my past self, remembering all those times where I felt like I wasn't enough. But then actually I realised that it was not just a message to my past self, because those feelings of not being enough are always creeping back into my life. I just feel like now I'm in a better place where I can move through it quicker and ground myself in the idea that I am. So anyway, I hope you got something out of it, liked it. I know maybe it was a bit self-indulgent, but who cares? I just wanted to mix it up and start the podcast in a different way. And I'm glad I did. I'll see how it goes down. And if everyone hates it so much, we'll revert back to the other thing. Anyway, I'm very excited to bring this conversation to you today with Anneli Roberts. Anneli got in contact with me a while ago because she'd been thinking about she has a podcast already. She's very well established in the sort of mental health advocacy scene, but she's wanting to maybe get a van and drive around and do a podcast. So someone put her in contact with me because they knew I did this. So it's really exciting. So I went and spent a few days with her in Cardiff. I'd never been to Cardiff before, so that was great. And it was really nice to sort of spend some time with her. And it was sort of going into this world which I knew very little about, because obviously I talk about mental health a lot, but what I do is very much focused face to face. And I sort of don't like, I sort of have this anxiety around social media and quite a complex relationship with it. I think in an ideal world I just wouldn't use social media at all. In an ideal world I'd just live in a hut by myself, but I see it as a very important tool for me to be able to share stuff, but actually I don't use it that much. But around this sort of time I did the interview with Bipolar Barbie, which is a few episodes ago, and then I had this opportunity to meet Anneli, who runs the podcast and project called Pigletish, and she does a lot of her work on Twitter. That's her main platform. I think she'd say that's her main platform, and she spends a lot of time sort of tweeting about mental health and connecting with people all around the world, and she has thousands and thousands and thousands of followers. And I think around that time, like, Bipolar Barbie was in contact with me and she had 80,000 Instagram followers, and then Pigletish, Anneli, had thousands and thousands of Twitter followers, and I looked at my own and I thought I only have like a few hundred on both those platforms. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. and it really sort of ate away at me for a bit. But actually, it was really nice to speak to those two people and meet them and spend some time, especially with Anneli, and see that actually that's not my thing. I don't thrive on social media, but I see how it's such a useful platform, and I think it's really amazing that people like Anneli are there and using the platform that they have with so many followers to spread the messages about mental health and to share stories and sort of really be able to connect to people on this large scale, which I'm not. And I realised through meeting these people that I don't need to, because these people are doing those things. So I can do my thing and just be really happy that those people like Anneli, are there doing their thing. And so, yeah, it's really good. I hope you get a chance to listen to her podcast and follow her Twitter account. I'll put links down below and everything like that. But yeah, I'm really excited to bring you this. And yeah, I've already bored you with a massive long poem and a load of blurbs. So yeah, God, it's so... I've taken up so much time with my own voice. I don't usually take up that much time, so why don't I just stop? But before I stop, I am going to ask if you could take some time to go to iTunes and rate and review the podcast. And if you can, go to my Patreon page and we get extra content there. But that is the way that I try and support this. So if there's anything you can offer me in way of financial support, Patreon is there. But if you can't, that's totally cool. And just try and, if you can, don't try, you're enough already. If you can, just share this if you like it. Share some of my other blog posts and content. That really helps me as well. But the main thing is that you're here listening to me and Anneli have this conversation right now. I'll be back at the end. Goodbye.
I'm Anneli. I blog and podcast about mental health and do the occasional YouTube video. I also put a lot of energy into tweeting about mental health because I think just little bite-sized snippets and updates. So most of what people would hear from me is on Twitter.
What sort of things do people hear from you?
My main focus is probably letting other people know that they're not alone in the way they're feeling if they're struggling with anxiety in particular, because that's what I suffer with. Been fortunate enough to never have depression, which is weird because everyone always marries them together and assumes you've got both. And my recovery from post-traumatic stress disorder following an abusive relationship is that was the driving force initially, but now it's a lot more about including people in the conversation, encouraging people to talk. Although, sometimes I'm just tweeting about my dog or whatever.
And why do you think it's important that you do what you do?
I think had I been listening to some of the content I create or reading some of the content I create when I was younger, I think I would have faced up to my feelings a lot quicker than what I have ended up doing, which is repressing it until I had no choice but to focus on my mental health. And I'm hoping that I can make some sort of difference for someone somewhere, that they can hear me talking to a guest they relate to, or they relate to me in some part of my journey. And just realise that actually, although you think, because nobody talks about it, although you think nobody feels like me, that I'm the only person going through this, nobody understands me, that actually there's a hell of a lot of people out there who are willing to listen and ready to hear what you've got to say. And also, I think it's really important that people understand that it's lots of bad things can happen to you, but you can channel it into doing something good and to making the world slightly better, even if it's only for a couple of people. And I think that's really important as well. So yeah.
Why do you think it's so hard for people to realise that's an option?
It's fucking shit, I guess, when you feel like that.
Actually, is it an option for everyone?
I can only speculate on that. I've only lived life from my perspective, and it was possible for me. Mm-hmm. And I certainly wouldn't have thought it was possible for me previously. So based on that, I'd say yes. I've met a lot of other people that can do it, but can everyone do it? Maybe not, but it's not something I can understand. I think you can certainly work on improving your situation.
Yeah, I don't know the answer. My sort of assumption is that yes. I guess it really depends on sort of what situation you're coming from and what the sort of environment around you is like, and I guess there's so many different hurdles for people to come Like,
there's
like we talked about, like mental health is such a, I don't even know what like, what do you think, what does the term mental health mean to you?
mental health to me is just a part of health. And I talk about it in that sense. So I talk about it like I'm pro mental health. I encourage people to maintain and improve their mental health. Now, I would like the world to be in a state where you only need to talk about health, but in the same way we've touched on some things like feminism or something like that, you know, like until they're treated as equal, then we can't treat them under one big umbrella. We can't just say I'm a health campaigner, because like what the fuck does that even mean anyway? Yeah. So for me it's just a way of kind of lumping together all the illnesses and conditions and syndromes and everything that's going on that stems from our thoughts, feelings, and I guess chemical imbalances in our brain. I don't know where they all come from, obviously. I do actually talk to a lot of people that have other chronic illnesses and disabilities as well. I think anything that people struggle to understand, I think anything that, like, I'm willing to lend my ears and my platform to that too. But mostly I talk about anxiety and PTSD because that's my experience. But my guests luckily have brought a massive range of different topics that they can cover.
Yeah.
I hate when people speak on the behalf of people whose experience they've not lived. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. You see people speaking up all the time about issues that they think will affect other people. Like they, you know, like look at the ratio of like white men in like politics, for example, and they speak on behalf of like the people in poverty when they've not lived it or something like that. And I find that's really frustrating for me, which is why I decided to have guests rather than just me sit and, you know, list off things I found on the NHS website or whatever.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree totally. This whole podcast project, Ministry of Change, came out of, like, it's my own experiences with depression and anxiety, and I want to explore that. So tends to be, when I'm involved, like, it always tends to get to that spin of depression and anxiety. So that's what I like to talk to other people that have other things, because I don't know, I don't really have, I don't think I have like experience of sort of things like PTSD, that sort of things. I guess like often I see mental health sort of marginalised as a separate thing to life, but for me it's the world we exist in, it's all like this holistic thing. And absolutely, and really what like I'm interested in is just listening to people tell the story of how they're navigating their own life. And for me it's very important, the idea that there is no normal, there's nothing that we need to be. So I think hearing those voices of other people is really important, isn't it? And like, who wants to hear someone talk about something that they don't know anything about from a position of authority? No,
that's ridiculous. But we are forced to listen to that narrative all the time. Like what you're doing is amazing as well. I think we both come at it. We have different podcasts, but similar kind of ethos all around a lot of it, I think. Or similar, different similar journeys, but different like routes. Yeah. And I think the thing with mental health is like communication and your relationships, your friendships, your environment, your physical health, your work life, all of that feeds into it. So there are certain people who will be negatively affected by like their own minds, where maybe there's circumstantial stuff they can change. It's just so complicated. Like it's just so complicated. But definitely I would say that I do separate mental health and mental illness as we talk about 1 in 4 with people who have mental health problems, and like I am 100% sure that that's underreported. Because for a start, I personally know people who are very aware of depression and anxiety, and they know they've got it, but they've never ever been to a doctor about it. So you would say it's higher than 1 in 4, that like anecdotally anyway, you would suggest that? I would suggest it's 1 in 1. Honestly, I can't. Yeah. I think to say that you've never had a mental health problem is as crazy as saying like that you've never had a health problem. Like what? So you're saying you've never had a health problem? You've never had a cold? Like, because it's a spectrum, and you can have very short periods of mental ill health, I think, stress, like people don't talk about stress much. Stress is a problem with mental health, and it can, just because it's to do with your job or to do with your home situation doesn't mean that you're not ill. Like just because you've bashed into the door doesn't mean you're not bruised. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's just weird. And to me, someone saying like I've never been ill mentally is like ludicrous. I can't get my head around it. But I accept that some people, it's the roller coaster's kind of flat enough that it's not worth pursuing it. Like, you don't go to the doctor when you've got a cold. I accept that, but everybody has the capacity to understand. If you've, like, sadness and depression are not the same things, but surely if you have experienced grief or sadness, you can empathize with depression. Or if you've experienced nerves, you can empathize with anxiety, or like minor, or if you've experienced pressure at work, you can surely empathize with stress. And I find, because we have such a range of emotions, I find it very difficult to understand how the stigma exists. And I think it just must exist from a place of people fearing their emotions rather than people not having the ability to understand. There's very few people in the world who actually can't understand emotion, and I know that is a pocket of people who aren't able to process it, but it's got to be like, I think 1 in 25 tops. I think it's about 4%.
What do you think that fear is?
A lot of people think that it is judgment of others. I personally think that we judge ourselves more, but the influence is from outside. So I think the world we've built with like marketing, everything is designed to undermine our self-confidence. Like, if you look at something a lot more straightforward, like maybe the diet industry, and you look at, you know, appetite suppressant lollipops, something like that.
That's
a
thing?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Heard of that.
So you've got, you know, people like the Kardashians, for example, getting paid millions of pounds to sell this idea to their audience that their audience don't look aesthetically pleasing enough. And I think there was an experiment in, oh God, now I'm going to be misquoting things on your podcast.
Sorry,
I
can jump
feel
in and correct him.
like it might be Hawaii. I'm not sure. But I mean, you'd be able to look it up very easily. There's certainly a place that wasn't exposed to mainstream television and things and in the 90s, they had only 2 or 3 reported cases of anorexia ever.
Is that Cuba, I think?
It might be Cuba.
I think, but again, people can write in and tell us that we're wrong.
Yeah.
I think it's Cuba though, because I think because of like communism and stuff,
I feel like people can just Google it themselves and stop relying on us, but also subscribe.
Either Hawaii or Cuba.
Yeah, it's not going to be it. It's going to be the Philippines. I don't know where it is. Like, but and then since they've been exposed to kind of like cable TV, is that even still what it's called? But you know, mainstream media, they've got as the proportion of people with eating disorders is as high as it is in any other developed country. And I think, like, if you think about that level of like how influencers like celebrities and things, like, that's just diet which feeds into mental health. Mental health is basically our whole existence. Like, there's so many things telling us we're not good enough. Like, marketing in itself is, what are they selling you? Like, people who speak about marketing, do teach you about marketing, will say to you like, what is marketing? We're selling you a solution. And to sell you a solution, they have to convince you've got a problem. And I think that one of the biggest ways to sell to us is to convince us that we won't be happy without whatever they're selling us. And we're exposed to that from birth. And I just think that feeds so heavily into, but not just buying things, also like the job, the career you need, or the things you should be like talking. I've gone a massive tangent.
No, I think it's true. I think like it's interesting. It's something that really fascinates me. Like we're fucked if like from the day we're born, we're told we're not good enough and we need to strive to do more. And society is sort of structured to create that. And I mean, sometimes it amazes me that there's not more more levels of depression and anxiety than there are, even though there are incredibly high levels.
Well,
I
do you feel like we've been talking a lot these few days about how like happy, fulfilled we feel now compared to before? Not necessarily happy, but we're feeling like we're getting to a place of fulfillment. And yet, I think like for me, certainly, I'm learning to measure my success by how I feel, not by what I have. And
yeah, for sure.
But how many times do people undermine what you're doing, or like, you know, say, what do you make? Well, what do you make for a living, or how do you make your money, or how do you go? Like, how does this work, or what's your job title? Like, why the fuck do you care what my job title is? I've just told you I'm happy. Like, get it, piss off.
Yeah, I've probably have talked about it on this podcast and bored people. I can't remember which ones have been recorded and offline things, but I really think that's true. This whole project has been an exercise in reframing how I'm living my life in many aspects, and there was a lot of those metrics which I used to follow which I'm not ticking off. Yeah, I'm like quite broke. I like don't have a house. Like I climbed right down the career ladder in many ways, but like I'm fine. I'm good with that, and we talked in the car in the van yesterday about that sort of idea of like fulfillment, and that happiness is and I sort of alluded to that fact that I feel overall, if I look at my life now, generally I feel happier, but I guess it required this big shift in what I thought happiness was, because I think I thought happiness was a destination to aim for, and with that mentality, sort of every day, every moment I wasn't feeling happy felt like a failure excess, felt like, what am I doing wrong? But now like I feel like it's more like if I cast out a net over my whole life and look at that, I feel like, yes, I'm a load more content and fulfilled with what I'm doing. But that doesn't mean to say that like some days I don't just wake up and think, what am I doing? I can't be bothered. So it's like a spectrum, I guess.
When I said to my dad, like, I want to live in a van, because obviously that's like a big part of what I thought we'd just be talking about vans. It turns out we've barely touched on vans. We've both mostly been talking about other stuff. But when I said that to my dad, and he said, like, you know, what I want for you is security. And I found that like so interesting, because to him, he's measuring that financially. To me, I measure my security by, again, how I'm feeling. Like, if I feel safe as someone with anxiety disorder, then I feel secure. If I feel like my relationships and friendships are stable, then I feel secure. If I feel like my mental health is on an even keel, or like, you know, progressing, or somewhat predictable, then I feel secure. And it's just so interesting, like, that I've come so far in this journey, but because it's such a self-exploration, like, personal thing, you can't always take everyone with you on the same... It's weird how many internal conversations I've had with myself about this, that then when I'm confronted with a statement like that, we're so disconnected in how we measure security. Like, that's so fascinating to me. Like, that some words have become automatically associated with money.
How did you sort of start doing the blogging and podcasting, or why did you start doing it more to the point?
I had been a few months free from my domestic violence, or my abusive relationship. Domestic violence sounds like a weird thing to say, but yeah. So I'd been in an abusive relationship for just about 3 years, and when that ended, it kind of, you'd think that that's the point where you recover, but actually when you're in that kind of trauma, you're so tense and so on edge that it creates what's called complex PTSD, which is, because it's a repeat trauma, something like domestic violence, it means that you have periods of safety and then danger, and then safety and then danger. So no matter how safe you are, you're always waiting for the next danger. And it felt like I was stood, even though I was logically I was free from the direct danger, I felt like I was stood in the eye of the storm, like right in the middle, and anything could go wrong at any moment. So I kind of decided to start like trying to write things down and make sense of this, back and forth to the doctor, and didn't have that much, it wasn't very easy to access support, so I decided to start writing things down. And at this point in my life, I made friends with a blogger she blogs about lifestyle and beauty stuff, just completely unrelated blog, but her name's Billie Gina. I should probably not do this without plugging her somewhat, but yeah. Okay. She said to me, like, that I feel like this is something that people should hear about and should know about. Like, you should be blogging this. And I just thought, God, I've always wanted to write. Why have I never done that? So why have I never thought I should be journaling this? And so, yeah, I just started writing about, to begin with, it was all very trivial things that make me anxious, just because I had to dip my toe in before I jumped right in. My first ever post was about my fear of orcas. And then my second one, I think, is about stairs. They're just the little things that make me scared every day. So I just started writing about these little trivial things, and then decided that I was going to... The response was great, better than I expected, and then I decided I'm going to do more of this. It's clearly something people want to hear. The amount of people, at this point, basically no one was reading it, like just my very small like group of actual friends and things. But the amount of colleagues and things that I made friends with because they also had anxiety and they kind of reached out to me, who hadn't talked to other people about it, I just realised this is something people need to be talking about. So I just thought, right, I'm going to talk more and more about this. And then off it went.
And do you find it hard to write about some of the stuff you write about?
No, I don't think so. I'm not sure anymore. I've probably written my most personal posts by now. I wrote one about my mum's death when I was 19, and I wrote one about my abusive ex. I wrote an open letter to him, in fact, called Forgiveness. Like, that was the one I was probably most scared of posting out of everything that I've done. But because I've delved into those two topics and they're kind of big traumas, I think everything that I write now, while sometimes I might feel a bit silly, like it's a bit easier to talk about the other stuff once you tackle like something as big as that. It was scary when I first admitted to the internet that I was having suicidal thoughts, because I think there's this danger with mental health that we wait until we feel better and say, last week I had a really bad period. So the first time I said, guys, I feel suicidal, was actually one of the most scary things that was probably, that not that long ago, really. And that was massive for me. That was really, So yes, I am scared sometimes.
And what was the response to something like that?
I think I had like 600 people be like, show me some sort of support, whether that just be like sending a heart or a message privately. I had people ringing me who I've connected to over the internet and stuff, and it's so weird that it's easier for me now to open up to the online friends that I've made. Like, not even when I'm face to face with them, than it would be to open up to some of the people that have been in my social circle for years. Nothing but support, not one single troll on that. And like, that's always really heartwarming. And but at the same time, I do always feel a little bit racked with guilt around that, because I see other people reaching for help, and like 600 is a lot. I was never going to get back to all those people, and I'm so fucking grateful that I had that response. Like, that in itself was enough to lift me. Or if I hadn't managed to lift myself out of it, it would have been enough to lift me, to see that volume of people. But that is a privilege that's come with having a growing following. Not everybody gets that. So that makes me sometimes feel guilty, and it's complex, and you feel conflicted about it. And Some people obviously will be reaching out and not getting any responses like that, but it's not because people don't care. It's most likely because people haven't seen it. So,
but I guess like it's the amount of responses you get. For me, it maybe I can't say what's important for you, but the amount of responses for me seems like less important than the actual act of using what you said as a privileged position of having people in a position to reach people and actually being able to speak with that authenticity and say, look, this is how I'm feeling suicidal. And that alone, I think, to me seems like the powerful bit. That's the thing which I think it's the important part in opening up the conversation and being like, this is something we can talk about, should talk about, are allowed to talk about.
Yeah, it's easy to feel when you're what the hell is a mental health advocate? It's a term that we've coined to try and put some sort of title on what we're doing, or that some people have coined for us and we've accepted, or whatever it is. Like, it doesn't look like anything. We're the people now, I feel like, trudging through the snow, making the first footsteps in that, like, collectively, a lot of us. There have been people, but fairly recently, that have come before us and stuff. And like, what is that? So it's easy for me to talk myself out of, how can I be a mental health advocate and yet be spreading negativity, saying I feel suicidal? Is that not hypocritical? If I feel suicidal, am I not being a hypocrite? If I feel suicidal but I've not rung the Samaritans, am I not being a hypocrite? But then I thought, well, no, because I'm not trying to save people in that sense. I'm trying to show people that they're not alone and that it's okay to admit to whoever you are, like whatever the real picture is, you're allowed to say that. So I thought, I'm not a mental health advocate because I think I'm cured. I'm a mental health advocate because I'm just saying, talk about whatever shit you've got going on. So it's really hard, that battle sometimes internally, to get past that and say, hey, I feel pretty messed up right now. I feel suicidal right now, or I feel down right now, or whatever you feel. Like, that's so difficult.
But I think that's important. Again, it's my perception of what you're doing is that you're not a person that's saying, I'm there, I'm cured, I have all the answers. As with what I do, I don't feel the same as well. It's saying life's fucking difficult sometimes, but we can talk about that, we can share it, we don't need to repress it. And like, I don't have all the answers, but I'm working through it and I'm sharing the journey. I mean, I feel maybe that's not what you feel, but I think it possibly...
No, it is. It is, yeah. No, that's...
Yeah.
I just think that even if what you feel is really dark, you should say it and acknowledge it. You don't have to say it to the internet. If like that's a big... I accept that that's a big thing to do.
Yeah.
But you have to say it to someone, even if you just say it to yourself, I think. You have to acknowledge all your feelings and let them in. And that is the one thing where I'd say, like, I never tell anyone what to feel or what to do, except for that. Like, be in touch with yourself and face your feelings. So I guess there is an element of, like, do this. There's probably a few more things I would encourage people to do, but... definitely the biggest one, I think, is just like talking to yourself and then talking to other people. We don't have like the mental health resources in this country. Like, we absolutely do not have the facility to treat everybody that needs treating. I think that peer-to-peer support is a fucking valid substitute for that. I think it's so valid. I feel much better every time I connect with someone else about their mental health or my mental health. And I think that it's a form of at least minimizing the damage that's being done, is just realizing that you're not alone. I think it's just so important.
You spend a lot of time on social media because that's sort of your platform. What are your views on social media in general, specifically in terms of the sort of mental health sphere? I'd said that weird. Mental health sphere.
I think that social media is a really positive thing in my life. that's because I'm authentically me and unapologetically me on the internet. So I'm naturally attracting people who are drawn to who I really am. I think I see a lot of social media's negative impact, but don't know if I've ever seen it where people are being real and it's negative. I think that comes from people thinking this is what I should be on social media, and then therefore you're seeing what everyone else thinks they should be on social media and you're comparing that to each other. I think it's mostly good. It's a tool. I think the one thing the comparison is something that we chat about a lot, like people in general, around mental health, particularly the generations that aren't as active on social media as we are. It's a great tool for communicating and all these things, but, people are comparing themselves to each other and feeling inadequate. And I think that, yes, that's definitely a danger, but if you're comparing yourself to other people on social media, you're exposed to a lot more people, so you are seeing a lot more of it. But then there is something you have to address within yourself there, because your life on social media should just be a reflection of your life. If you're that is not something. If you quit social media, you would automatically not compare yourself to people on the TV, etc. And we've got this culture of YouTubers and bloggers and things who are maybe easier to compare yourself to because their lives seem more real, because they're not soap characters or celebrities at the Oscars. So they're more relatable because they're sat in their living rooms and things. But they're also a lot of the time sat in their living rooms with scripted videos or a massive audience who are funding them being able to do certain things. And, it's not, again, even if someone puts out a video every single day of an hour of their life, that's 1 hour out of 24 that you're seeing of what they're doing. They've spent at least that amount of time just sat in their pants editing it. And I think it's so important to remember that even when you're advocating for mental health, so people are seeing my highs and my lows, and they're seeing my successes and my failures, but they're not seeing me sat watching Netflix for 4 hours, in my pajamas with my dog, eating, I don't know, Cheetos or whatever I'm doing. I never eat Cheetos. I'm not American. What's happening?
I don't know. You're trying to break into the American market on this male Cheeto. It's good. Well, maybe you can arrange that. Maybe next week you can do a 4-hour live stream of you watching Netflix.
Yeah.
On the sofa.
But why? Yeah. I mean, then that's just Gogglebox, isn't it? Have you heard of that TV? Have you still seen it?
I got introduced to it very recently by someone, and I also got introduced to Geordie Shore.
Oh, I've not.
And it was.
I know what that is, but
I had heard of it. I'd never watched it, and it was pretty much everything I don't like about television and the worst parts of humanity put into a television program, I think. But maybe that's very judgmental. I apologise to all the people that love Geordie Shore. Yeah, Jersey Shore's the American one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway.
But the point is that people don't see my mundane.
Yeah.
Because what kind of content creator would I be if we just sat here now watching TV on our headphones, because we wouldn't have the copyright to share the TV audio, and just every now and then said pass that biscuit or whatever, no, why would people don't need to see that. But just because you're not seeing me do that doesn't mean I'm not doing it. And just because you don't see people on social media or on the internet in general do that doesn't mean that 90% of their life isn't boring as fuck. It is, and that's just what life can be. And yeah. I think I don't think social media is the root cause of that. I don't think that's the cause of the problem. I think the problem on social media has been caused by a narrative that's already been put in place for us by mainstream media. And I think the switch to social media is such a positive one, because anybody with an internet connection and any kind of device now has a platform to speak, and I think that's really, really good, because it's kind of taking the power away from the media. But I think that influencers, like, influence, I'm doing the air quotes, like influencers, like, you're going to get influencers in all different niches, and some of them are going to be just as bad as mainstream media, and some of them are going to be wonderful. And like, just, I think that anybody that is listening who has a problem with their social media feed needs to really have a look and see who you're following, and just revise it. Then if you look at someone's post and it makes you feel shit, take them. There's no obligation to follow anyone, just get rid of them.
I guess it's just such a complex thing, because we talked about this earlier, like social media just sort of landed out of nowhere and no one knows really what it is or how to use it, like, or what in terms of like what the long-term effects or how it's going to evolve. And like young people can't look to like elders for advice because elders have no idea what social media is, and it's just this sort of like, it's this thing that we don't really know about. And so there's like, so often it's painted as a completely negative thing, like a damaging thing, especially on mental health. But like, I guess it's, as with everything, there's a healthy balance, and I guess it's probably about finding your own space within that and what makes you comfortable. I see that, like what you were talking about, as like that. It sort of exacerbates an external situation anyway. If you're feeling insecure, and then you go on Twitter and hope that and expect like to have that hole filled, it's probably not going to work.
No, you have to find that yourself, definitely. But like it's a tool to, I would say that if it is primarily a tool to network and find people who have common interests with you.
Yeah.
And if you see it as that, and not, it shouldn't, I don't think it should be relied upon as your way to keep in touch with friends, because I think once you've reduced your friendship to just seeing each other's Facebook status updates, you might as well just call it quits anyway, honestly. Like, unless you're going to actually engage. Like, I try to minimize the people I have in my social media who I wouldn't be interested in chatting with. If I'm just scrolling through, This is just my view. I appreciate everyone is different, but if I'm getting my updates on my ex-colleagues' life and engagement through Facebook, but I'm not going to congratulate or reach out, then what's the point? Why am I kidding myself that that's still a real connection?
Yeah.
So for me, it's definitely about finding other people who are interested in mental health. That's one thing, but I find people who are interested in Harry Potter, which I'm into.
Just explain, sitting in your living room and you have a massive Christmas tree with so much Harry Potter memorabilia underneath it.
Yeah, and it's mostly just stuff I own and not actual Christmas decorations that I've just shoved on a tree.
Yeah.
But yeah, and finding people who also are into art, because I love painting, and finding people who are into, so sometimes I will just see a tweet that resonates with me and I'll follow that person, they'll follow me back, and we have each other's content. But people that have got stuff to say that I'm interested in hearing, basically, is what I use Twitter for. And I think it's a really powerful networking tool. But if you were 13, 14, and you just follow all the people that you know at school, which I think is what it might be becoming for young people, then I think that is a little bit, I can understand how that becomes overwhelming, because it's so easy to become focused on whether, like, you have how many followers you have and stuff, like young people. But I also think it can still be a really informative, like, supportive tool for young people. They shouldn't be using it younger than 13. I accept that so many people lie, but they're not supposed to be on any of these social networks until they're 13. And I know that Molly, who is the assistant psychologist on my podcast, she talks all the time about how she finds that she was expecting social media to be really negative when she started working with young people in their on their mental health. And she was really surprised when she found out that for most of them, it was actually, like, particularly to her, was like a resource of support with their mental health. Because there's so many, like, amazing people out there. most people in the world are nice. I firmly believe that. If not all people in the world are nice on some level. And most people that you come into contact, if you move in circles of people with things in common with you, will be similar to you. So I think you can find those communities.
No, I think social media is a big... I mean, I have a complex relationship with it. We talked about it already, but I think it has so many benefits. It's definitely helped me on this journey connect with a lot of people that I wouldn't have been able to connect with in other ways and share stuff. And I think, and I think that sort of that understanding of like flipping sort of the worldview towards like actually most people are in essence quite kind and quite willing to help and quite willing to sort of be supportive. That's important to remember. I think it's easy to slip into this idea that humanity's base instinct is conflict and to sort of like spread hate and
maybe it is in a mob, but it's not in a individual
basis. And if you can get a group of individuals together, they don't necessarily have to form an angry mob. They can form a sort of, I don't know, sort of a
like
movement
a hippie
of peace and
loveliness.
love.
Yeah.
But and I mean, I strongly believe that. Whether that's delusional, I don't know. But I'm happy to stick with my belief.
During this conversation just now, it's just occurred to me that if social media didn't exist, I think I'd be dead.
Yeah.
Because all of this expression around my recovery has come, the blog and the podcast where I express myself most openly, but they wouldn't really exist. They are kind of a form of social media in themselves. And they certainly, nobody would find the things unless you had social media. And I'm just thinking about all the times when, particularly last year in my most heavy recovery year where, everything was very turbulent. And I'm just thinking about every single time someone has reached in when I didn't even know I needed to reach out and just sent me a message saying, hey, I've seen you struggling. I hope you're okay or something like that. Those conversations, I've had those conversations in real life because the Twitter community in particular has nurtured that environment for me in my digital life. It's weird saying digital life. They're still real people, right, behind the screens. So yeah. I still count it as real life. But that community I found on social media has actually, I know on some level that what I'm doing is helping other people. But I think that when people are thanking me, I find it weird because they've also saved my life and gave me a lot of meaning and a purpose and been there in times where, if you think I've been waiting for over 2 years for therapy based on post-traumatic stress disorder, who would I have turned to realistically had I not had that? I've learned to communicate with my best friend and housemate Sarah because I learned to communicate with other people going through similar things to me. If I'd not had them, would I ever have been able to constructively express myself to Sarah or to my dad or anyone? Or would I have just been butting heads with them thinking, you don't understand me, you've not gone through what I've gone through? So having other people who've gone through it, who've maybe, given me phrases and stuff that I can use, would I have got to where I am alive even, let alone be at the stage I'm at? Probably not. Honestly, probably not. And that's really shocking. It's weird. It's such a weird thing to say.
No, so I think it's a really powerful realisation.
Oh, thank you, Anneli, for so many things. Thank you, Anneli, for being Anneli. Thank you, Anneli, for the work that you do. I think she reaches so many people through her platform and helps people through really dark and difficult times. And I think can be hard on the internet sometimes and to find those people, and Anneli is certainly one of those beacons of light on Twitter that do really help people. So please, do go and check out her Twitter account, which is @Pigletish, and you can also look at her website, which is pigletish.com, and that has links to that, has her blog and links to all the other stuff that she does. And obviously the podcast, listen to the Pigletish podcast. She has some amazing guests on there talking about all different aspects of mental health and life, and it's just really interesting. So look at that, and I'll put links down to all this stuff at the bottom, by the way. And thank you so much, and thank you, Anneli, for hosting me in Cardiff and showing me around. It was really lovely. Right. Yes, as I said, so if you'd like to find out more about my journey with the Ministry of Change, then please go to my website, which is theministryofchange.org. If you want to help me bump up my Twitter followers and be one of those followers, then my Twitter hashtag, I think, is ministry_change or something like that. And then, as I said at the beginning, I am trying to fund this project through Patreon. I don't get paid a salary to do my mental health advocacy work, to do my to create these spaces to talk about mental health. So anything that, if you can contribute, that is wonderful. My Patreon page is patreon.com/Ministry of Change. And anything that you can offer, a couple of dollars, in American dollars, by the way, a couple of dollars a month really, really helps me. And you'll get access to some extra content, and I'm gradually over the year building up more into that in terms of perks and things like that. So that's really good. But obviously, if you're not in a financial position to do that, there is no obligation at all, and just listening is the main thing. I would really like it if you could go over to wherever you listen to your podcast and rate and review it. That really, really does help me. I'd love a few more reviews. It'd be really nice, so I can get some feedback of sort of how you're enjoying this or hating it, whatever. But yes, please. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me in this space. It's been really good. I love doing it, and I will be back soon with another episode of the Ministry of Change podcast. Goodbye.